brought to you by Mint Mobile. Stay tuned for a special offer at the end of the show. Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Moor, and today is Tuesday, February 20th, 2024, and I've got the excellent Anshel Sag here with me. Hi, Anshel. How are you?
I'm good. I'm happy to be on the podcast again.
Yeah, I'm glad you're able to join me to discuss what we expect to see in Barcelona in a few days. I'm fresh from Antarctica, and I'm just on my way home, really, and then only to just take off to go to MWC. For those of you who were paying attention last week, that was pre-recorded with my friend Tim Stevens. We did an EV special. We talked about the state of the EV world. But today is all going to be about phones and mobile, so back to normal. There's a bunch of news that I didn't cover last week, so we're going to talk about that. A lot of it is kind of like building up to MWC, right? So overall, what are your thoughts on going into Barcelona here?
I think it's going to be a lot of the usual, phone announcements, watch announcements, but the AI madness of CES is going to continue.
Oh, hang on a second, Anshel. I just realized something. I never hit record on Skype, so let's start again. Just let everything roll, but I need video, okay. So here we go. Wow, I'm a little rusty after my vacation. Okay, let's start again. Brought to you by Mint Mobile. Stay tuned for a special offer at the end of the show. Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Mimshwar, and today is Tuesday, February 20th, 2024, and I have the excellent Anshel Sag here with me of Moor Insights and Strategy. Hi, Anshel. How are you?
Thanks a lot for having me on the podcast again. I really appreciate it.
No worries. I mean, you and I kind of catch up every few months, and it's lovely to have you on. We are going to chat about MWC, of course. As I mentioned to you, I just got back from Antarctica, and I'm heading to MWC pretty much right away. I did a pre-recorded podcast for last week with my friend Tim Stevens talking about EVs, the state of the EV industry. We do that every few years. It's kind of fun. But we didn't tell you about phones last week. So this show is going to be catching up on a lot of the news that I missed while I was away. And about our thoughts of what's coming up with MWC. Anshel, MWC, Barcelona, what is it looking like to you right now?
I think it's going to be a lot of phone launches, like it always is.
Well, yeah.
The usual. But I also think there's going to be this continued momentum of AI announcements that I think started at CES and will continue to roll through MWC. And I don't think they're going to end with MWC.
No, but I'm actually pretty happy that it's looking like a normal show. Like, I'm sure we're going to see a lot of AI and stuff. Like, it's going to be, kind of flavored after the current zeitgeist of tech. But what always makes me happy about MWC is that it is a phone show. It is a mobile tech show. And so carriers and networks and phones and mobile devices and, unlike CES, who kind of is more trendy in the sense of going after the current trends, I like the fact that you can go to Barcelona and pretty much know what you're going to expect. And as you said, there's some phones coming out. We're going to cover some of the news about that. Some of them have actually been announced already with dates. But we're not going to get to see them and play with them until then. So I'm actually super excited to see some of these phones in person finally. I do have some devices coming in. I should be picking up when I'm home and tomorrow before heading to Barcelona, and some arriving after that are related to these announcements. I can't tell you more than that, but stay tuned. There's a second volley of phones after the volley that was early January, right? Wasn't that unusual this year?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's been slowly drifting forward every year where, last year we had some like late January, early February announcements. And I feel like this year it just kind of kept moving forward. I think everybody's trying to compete with each other for who can launch earlier in the year.
Yeah, I think that's, we've talked about this on the show. I think it's been driven by the Chinese phone manufacturers wanting to kind of beat the New Year, right? The lunar Chinese New Year. And at the same time, of course, the chip makers accommodating that. Like, Qualcomm moved their conference up. MediaTek came out with their flagship earlier this year as well. We're going to talk about the Vivo X100 today because you've been playing with it. That's the MediaTek Dimensity 9300 device. Finally, folks, I've been testing and using the Oppo Find X7 Ultra as my primary phone for photography to Antarctica. My review of this phone will be, I took the Oppo Find X7 Ultra to Antarctica to test the cameras. Like, that is a nice headline, right? So
Yes.
honestly, I think this is what's happening. I was just caught by surprise at Samsung doing their mid-January thing. Like, I knew that we'd get OnePlus and, Xiaomi the 14 and all that coming out in China in December, and then some of them launching like after CES. But I did not expect Samsung to be so early. I figured they would just be like, whatever, we're Korean, we're doing our own thing. Let's do February again like we did last year. But instead, we all struggled to cover all this stuff because you can't leave Samsung alone, right?
Yeah.
So,
and I mean, I think they are being influenced by the Chinese OEMs for sure.
100%. Apple, however, is still playing their own thing, their own game. But look, it doesn't matter because they're not dependent on those chipsets, so they can do whatever they want. So X100, what's your take on that phone? I have barely touched it briefly during the MediaTek Summit. Or maybe at CS, I can't remember. Brad let me play with it briefly, but I just have no context because I've seen Ben Sin cover it extensively. He's one of his favorite phones. The telephoto on this is amazing. And he's posted a ton of stuff. Is that your feeling as well?
Yeah, I would say, I've been seeing Ben's posts and I've been really excited to get my hands on one. So I'm really glad that I do have one to play with. I think, the camera is really stellar. And the 10x telephoto, when I'm looking at the shots I take, they're extremely like sharp. The colors are good. Like, it feels like another tier of smartphone camera. But also, I ran some benchmarks. I tested it, against my regular, benchmark suite of tests. And the Dimensity 9300 either, keeps up or beats in a lot of really competitive benchmarks. I would say the multi-core performance and the single-core performance are on par or better than what Qualcomm has in the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, at least on the CPU side. It's not as fast on the GPU and with ray tracing, but it's still very much up there with the 8 Gen 3. So it really feels like a phone that has the performance that you would expect from a flagship from Vivo.
Right. Are you seeing a leap forward compared to the Dimensity 9200 from last year?
I wouldn't say it's a leap because I feel like the 9200 was a pretty big improvement. And I feel like the 9300 is also a pretty sizable one. I would say, if anything, the CPU was a big leap. I think that's where they made that big move. But on the GPU and the ray tracing, I still think it's pretty comparable in terms of the rest of the market. But I do think they made a big jump on CPU, and I think that was evident when they announced that chip.
Well, they went full big cores on that, right? So that's a big deal. Haha, big deal. But Ben also mentioned that battery life is not the best. So now that also depends on the battery size. Do you know off the top of your head what it is?
Yes, it's a 5400, I believe.
Okay, so it's actually pretty gigantic. And have you experienced any issues with that?
No, but I would also say that I haven't used it as a daily driver.
Right.
It's kind of been like a secondary phone, so I wouldn't say that I can comprehensively assess the battery life, especially since I would probably use it on T-Mobile, and it doesn't have the 600 megahertz band on it.
Oh, right. So so it's going to suffer.
That would affect battery life already.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I would have to use it on AT&T most likely to get a good assessment. But my AT&T line is kind of already my secondary line or even my third line. So it's kind of like a little
But
bit
even
tough to
then, it's
assess.
not optimized for this market. That's the reality, right?
No.
Like I've got the same issue with the Find X7 Ultra here as well. But you know, the thing that's interesting to me is the phone that's impressed me the most for battery life in this new generation so far has been the OnePlus 12, with its
Yep.
5400 milliamp hour battery. And the 8 Gen 3 is just, and you can tell that, you know, they talked a lot about it in their PR, about the optimizations. Yeah, yeah. For those of you on Patreon here, Anshel just
I've got
flashed
both the
the
X100 and the
oh,
OnePlus.
perfect. There you go. So
Good
if you're
visual aids.
wondering what it looks like, now you know. But look, you know, the 12 to me is kind of like if I look at my benchmarks that I ran, because I keep track of them for Hot Hardware, I do most of my reviews there, and they are very, you know, benchmark centric. So I have the best battery life that I've ever recorded on a non-gaming phone.
True.
So far, the previous champion, believe it or not, was the Moto Edge Plus last year. And, you know, a Gen 2 with a very large battery and some optimizations. But I think, to me, that's impressive. And if, you know, the X100 comes anywhere close to that, I think we have a winner no matter what, right?
Yeah, I also think having that bigger battery gives them a little bit more wiggle room in terms of, you know, what the SoC's performance is on battery life. But that said, OnePlus, I agree with you. The battery life is stellar. Like, there have been times where I'm like using the phone to run some benchmarks. You know, I do some stuff on it, and I go put it back in the charger, and it like didn't really decharge at all. Like,
yeah,
it's just it's crazy.
It's stunning, and honestly, I think, you know, I haven't talked about the OnePlus 12 much in the last few weeks. Ever since my review, we did a whole podcast about it. You know, I keep going back to it because it's such, I think if I wasn't so invested in Pixel, because I'm kind of like, I always joke about it, say Stockholm syndrome with the software. Like it's the whole, you know, all of the call features and the AI features that Google delivers that are unique to the Pixel, right? But I hate this. I hate the chipset. I'm not that fond of the hardware itself. The camera is really solid still. Obviously, it's one of the best, but I think the OnePlus 12 is at least as good now. And you know, I feel like if I had to start from scratch right now today, I'd get a OnePlus 12. I think for the price, for the value, that's the winner today. And I think this is a good segue for me to talk about the Find X7 Ultra, because ultimately, if you look at the spec sheet of these two phones, the Find X7 Ultra is a OnePlus 12 Ultra. Like they have the same display, same chassis, same port location, button location, same alert slider, you know, same. Yeah, it's the same panel. It's a 4500 nits, you know, 120 hertz LTPO, the whole shebang, and Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, la 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 la. Same wireless charging and wired charging numbers. The only difference is the battery's a little smaller at 5000 milliamp hour, and you got that extra camera. You got, you know, you basically have that same crazy, you know, 4850, 64 megapixel, you know, triple core camera, ultra wide main and tele, and then you have an extra tele. So in all, they're all 50 megapixels. Your main sensor is now a 1-inch Lintia sensor, the one that's probably going to be, based on rumors, on the Xiaomi 14 Ultra as well. So that thing is insane. In low light, it's mind-blowing because it absorbs something like 1.3 times more light than the previous 1-inch sensor from Sony, the 989 or whatever it was. And so for low light photography, the main sensor on the Oppo is significantly better than even the OnePlus 12 sensor. But in terms of ultra wide, they're about the same. In terms of 3x telephoto, they're about the same. But here's what's interesting. You've got that extra telephoto. You've got two periscopes, right? You have like a 3x and a 6x. But the 6x, it's a smaller sensor. And I feel that when you hit 6x and more, like you go to 10x or something, I'm not sure it's better than the OnePlus 12. I think it peters off sooner, like at 20 or 30x, you start seeing a difference between OnePlus 12 and the Oppo. But I don't think I would shoot with the Oppo at higher than 30x. And if you've used the OnePlus 12, you know that it does pretty good at 30x, right? So I think I'm not sold like, I think, yeah, it's impressive. 4 50-megapixel sensors, 2 are periscope telephotos, woohoo, right? But of course, that 1-inch main sensor. But I'm not convinced, folks, that you would want more than the OnePlus 12, which is essentially a Find X7 non-ultra, right? And that's my conclusion. Then I also, because I'm crazy, I took all the other phones to Antarctica, right? I took the iPhone 15 Pro Max, the Pixel 8 Pro, the Galaxy S24 Ultra, and I did a phone comparison because the camera, because I'm like, of course I am, right? I've got penguins to photograph, might as well do it with 4 cameras. Guess what? 30x on the Samsung, this is before the camera update, I think is slightly better than 30x on the Oppo and the OnePlus. So that tells you that perhaps, I mean, remember, the Samsung has, they're very similar if you think about it, right? Because Samsung has the smaller main sensor, yeah, but it has a 3x and then a 5x, and the Oppo has a 3x and a 6x, right? Now, the 6x sensor on the Oppo is 50 megapixels, but it's pretty small. And then you have that 5x 50 megapixel on the Ultra, the Samsung. But that one is bigger and is actually, I think, a better quality sensor. So when you're zooming up, I find that the image processing and all that adds up to a slightly better photo, maybe, at least in daylight. So I was actually surprised because, there's been, I don't know if you follow, there's been a lot of complaints about the Samsung's cameras not being quite tuned right.
Yeah, I mean, I heard there was an update. I think we talk about that later. But
yeah,
I would say if there's a phone that I would want to use for telephoto zoom, it's this one, right? Because the 10x
so tell
with
me
the 50
about
megapixel.
This. Yeah, 10x was 50. That's got to be killer.
It is. The detail is just impeccable. Like, I haven't actually had a chance to fully test it out in a way that I think is ample. So for me, I'm going to compare this against the S23 Ultra because 10x and 10x. But I'm also going to compare it against the 24 Ultra because I just am not convinced that they can get away with using a 5x optical with a larger sensor and a higher resolution sensor and say that they can be the same as a 10x optical performance. And I know a lot of people have said that, like, once you go past like 30, it's a noticeable difference.
Yes.
But for me, like, the sweet spot for most photos is 30.
Yeah, I agree. I think my take so far as with the S24 Ultra has been that it is better in daylight. It falls apart in low light because it can't bin anymore because it's cropping the sensor, right? A 10x. So I feel that maybe a 10x, I mean, the previous sensor, the 10 megapixel they had in there, wasn't that great in low light either. But I think this is where the Vivo wins over the Oppo even, because the Oppo, it's a 50 megapixel sensor. I can't remember. It's like 0.7 microns or something. It's not great. And it can crop. But here's my take. I think that as much as the Samsung S24 series needs a camera update, there's a few tweaks that need to happen. I actually think that the Oppo needs even more. Like, I think that it's a little behind in the software compared to the Galaxy. I think the hardware is certainly stellar. And here's where I think the Oppo wins is portraits and without even portrait mode, because you have that 1-inch sensor. So you start taking photos, the bokeh is just, right? And on top of that, you got Hasselblad's image processing, like color science. And it's just, the portraits on that thing are just delightful. But I'm surprised because I was like, when I finally put them side by side, I was like, oh, wow, the Samsung's doing better than I expected and the Oppo worse than I expected, even though they're all both very, very good. I kind of have a feeling that you need to go to Antarctica with the X100, Anshel.
Yeah, well, I would love to.
Someday. And we'll have better camera phones then. And to be frank, in my testing, now that I've actually spent time comparing these camera systems, the Pixel 8 and Pro in this case, and the iPhone 15 Pro Max, which is the 5x telephoto, are pretty much on par, but I prefer the image processing and the results from the Pixel. But where the where every phone, all phones got beaten by the iPhone was on video. Still, you
I
cannot.
knew you
And
were
you
going
know
to say
what?
that.
You'll be very happy to know, Anshel, and I'll share those files with you now that I have better internet again. I have shot a crap ton of Vision Pro content, spatial video from
Nice.
Antarctica. So I'll send that your way, the actual raw files, because I believe I can't file share those. Otherwise, you lose the metadata. But
Yeah.
I've already shared them with a few other people that have Vision Pros, and they said it looks really great. The thing I found out about recording spatial video is that you can't zoom, and so you're tempted to pan to do something, right? You can't just, and so panning, apparently you have to be careful because you pan too fast, people get motion sick. So I kept shooting video. So the ship I was on was an expedition ship, and it had Starlink. It had 6 antennas that it was sharing among about 200 people. And it was, if you know anything about Starlink, the maximum is about 220 megabits, 220 to 250 megabits
per
gateway. So you add that times 6, right? And it gives you about 1.345 gigabits, right? Now divide that by, 200 people that are not necessarily using it for heavy lifting, because a lot of people weren't uploading YouTube videos, right? But it was holding up. I was, and they traffic shape it, right? They have an IT system on the ship, and they kind of load balance it, because every person you have to have an account with them, and you log into their system, so they know how much data you're using, and they'll throttle you if you start going too crazy. I actually talked to their IT guy, and had a really good explanation how the system works on the ship, which is really cool. It's a brand new ship that just built it, so it's super state of the art. But the thing about that was I was able to personally myself monopolize about 50 megabits down and 5 megabits up, which in the middle of freaking the end of the world is pretty impressive.
Was that before or after you talked to the IT guy?
No, that was before and after. What I found was if I really wanted to avoid their traffic shaping, I would spin up a VPN, and they don't block VPNs, and they don't traffic shape the VPNs at all. So I was getting the best performance when I fired up a VPN. But we're diverging. What I'm trying to get here to is that I had enough bandwidth to upload some of my spatial videos to some friends, and they immediately said, stop panning so fast. Even though to me, it felt like I was really taking my time because I was trying, So yeah.
So you got feedback on your dailies from your editors.
Basically, yeah. But I shot a lot of vertical video too. That way I can do side-by-side comparisons, and I'm planning to edit a YouTube video for you folks with my thoughts on that. But yeah, stay tuned. There's a bunch of content coming from Antarctica and reviews and things. So, but look, tell us a little more about the X100 in terms of the killer thing. Sounds like the 10x 50 megapixel telephoto. What are the rest of the lenses, and what else does it do?
So I think it's 50 megapixels across the board on everything.
Okay, yeah. And
honestly, the shooting experience is good. Moving from lens to lens is very smooth. Everything, I haven't had a chance to shoot too much low light yet, so I can't speak to that. But the daylight photos all look great. And because it's like very heavily Zeiss focused, they really like put a lot of emphasis on when you're taking portrait photos, like what the focal length is of your portrait photos,
right?
And like which lens you're trying to emulate, kind of,
Yep,
doing the same thing with like Hasselblad. And I like some of those things because there's different types of lenses that Zeiss makes that give you different bokeh, right? So that's one thing to consider. And then I want to play more with the night shots, because apparently they have like a whole, like, you can shoot night photos and without needing a tripod.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting one. And then I haven't played too much with video, but it does, the usual slow-mo and long exposure photos and panos. And then of course it has a pro mode where you can do the usual, shoot raw photos, shoot super raw photos.
Right.
And yeah, I think it's very much a world-class camera. Um, I feel like I need more time with it to really get an idea of where it sits in the continuum, because, I have Pixel 8 Pro, I have iPhone 15 Pro
Yeah.
Max, I
You
have
have all the
S24
goodies.
Ultra. I'm trying to like put my mind, figure out where it fits, but I just feel like I haven't had it long enough to really give a full assessment yet. But that's just like a time thing. I'll probably figure it out in maybe a week or two. But so far, I was really impressed. And one of my biggest complaints is like a lot of OEMs will like forget the basics. Like they won't really like focus on what's Wi-Fi performance, what's 5G performance, or battery life. So sometimes OEMs get a little too focused on the camera, forget about other things. But
You're right.
so far, it seems like this phone is rock solid. And the first thing I will say when I noticed when I got this phone was, in the hand, it feels a lot like a OnePlus.
Yeah, well,
Like
it's the same parent company, right?
it really, like, it felt familiar in a certain way. And then the other thing that reminded me was, oh yeah, Chinese OEMs include a free rubber case for your phone
Yeah, they
until you
do.
get a proper one, which I
Correct.
feel like US OEMs should be doing, just because.
And there's a charger in the box because of special charging speeds.
Yes, and I did test the charging with my OnePlus chargers, and it looks like it does fast charge.
Yeah.
Over wired, but not wireless.
Yeah. No, so Vivo is a bit of outlier in the BBK Group universe, in the sense that, in my experience, because I get all their phones, but I don't know why I don't have the X100. I've asked for it a few times now, but basically they use some of the same technologies, but in the past they haven't always been compatible in terms of fast charging between the rest of BBK and Vivo for some reason. Vivo and IQ as well, IQOO, which is a sub brand of Vivo. But here's the good news. The good news is some phones, and I think the X100 do work with others, as you've experienced. And more importantly, if you have a Realme or an Oppo or a OnePlus, they're all the same. So I carry the 240-watt charger from the Realme GT3 from last year, the 240-watt capable phone from last year's MWC. I carry that around with me everywhere so I can charge any BBK Group phone at the fastest rate possible. It's very nice to have.
The one thing I was going to add was, what I do like about the X100 Pro is that one of the things you can choose is like the color science, and you can choose between vivid, textured, or natural. And natural is like Zeiss's color science. So you can really like hone in on how you want your photos to look on a regular basis, not just, custom settings. It's just like, that's going to be how it comes out every time you grab a shot.
So you know who does that as well? Xiaomi, with their Leica partnership. They have two different Leica color science modes that you can pick, and they're right in the UI, and they stays with the last one you picked. So it's kind of like picking your film stock, right? If you're shooting with film, which is really cool.
Which reminds me of like the Fuji cameras and how you have all these different.
Exactly. The Vivitar or whatever modes and stuff like that. It's really cool. I was just looking at the specs of the X100, and I thought you said the telephoto is a 10x, but it says here the telephoto is a 4.3x optical. And so I'm a little confused. Maybe they're wrong.
I think that's a different lens.
Is it?
Yeah, because there's a 1, a 2, a 4.3, and a 10.
Oh, there's a 10 as well. I see.
Yeah.
I missed that. Well,
the 4.3 was a very odd number for me, but I personally prefer 1, 3, 5, and 10 if I can get it.
Yeah. I want at least, from now on, definitely want 2 telephotos, just because, once you've lived with that, you don't want to go back.
Sorry. I correct myself. 1, 3, and 10 I'm happy with. Especially if the 3 does the crop.
I think I've become a big fan of having, like, I like the direction that, like, BBK Group, Oppo, and OnePlus in particular are taking with 3x, 6x, like, or 4x, 8x, or, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm worried about that weird, uncanny valley digital zoom area. So like that's kind of why I'm happy in a way that Samsung's gone to 5, because I feel like there was a big, if you shot at 5x or 6x on the S23 Ultra last year, it was rough. And I think that honestly, as a focal length, I find that I've been shooting a lot at 5x. I think it's because I've had a Pixel for so long, Pixel Pro, and it was 4x and 5x with the 6 Pro, 7 Pro, and 8 Pro. And then the iPhone has a 5x, and I've got that iPhone. And then, there was like, I don't know. I just feel like Samsung now has a 5x, so I'm happy because I can shoot like highest quality at 5x. I shoot at 5x, I shoot at 3x, I shoot at 2. I shoot at 2x a ton. And I kind of like what Nubia has been doing with their phones, where their main lens is, optically a 2x. So it's like they have an ultra wide that covers 0.5 all the way to 2, and then they have a 2x main lens, and then they have a telephoto, right? I shoot so much at 2x. I shoot more at 2x than I do at 1x. Of course, the ultra wide always comes in handy for some stuff, but I'd say 2, 3, 5, and 10 are my main go-tos. And then if I have the right hardware with me, like S24 Ultra, Find X7 Ultra in this case, even the OnePlus 12 and the OnePlus Open, because of that massive 64 megapixel 3x telephoto that can easily do 20x, I can do 20x. And then, the Samsung, I've tried 30 and it's all right still. And the Oppo is still all right at 30. But it starts to fall rapidly after that off the cliff. But I still think, as you said, 30x, I mean, once you reach that, it's like, you're looking at basically carrying like an Alpha 7 with a 7220 or something to get anything close to that, right? And you look at the difference in, in size and weight, and it's like, it's not the same quality, not remotely, but I still feel like it's getting there.
I've brought my Alpha to a game. I was smart enough to separate all the parts out so that they all looked smaller. So I didn't have the lens attached to the body, and I had like all the parts of the lens kind of like disassembled so it looked small enough to get in. And I think I followed the rules in terms of what's available. I was kind of on the edge of it. And I'll tell you, it is not enjoyable bringing a full-size SLR to a game. It's fun for about 5 or 10 minutes, but unless you're really up close, you need even bigger glass, and they're not going to let you in with that.
Yeah, and so, look, I feel that where we're at right now is pretty damn versatile if you look at these phones, right? Like, even like for those of you who are never going to get an Oppo, because the one I'm using is a Chinese model. I had to like remove all the Chinese app, install Play Store, like they had to do a big cleanup to get the phone to behave in any way that I wanted. I did manage to get everything to work, including Google Pay, which is cool, which is, a testament to Android compatibility out there. When Google certifies a product, it really means something. But that being said, I feel like 5G band compatibility, as you said, 600 megas on T-Mobile, all of that has gone out the window. Even the performance on AT&T there's no VoLTE, so it doesn't work on AT&T half the time, right? And in fact, I've found that at least in San Francisco, AT&T will disable my SIM if I leave it in a phone without VoLTE for too long. Wow. And I literally have to call them to re-enable my SIM because they're like, we don't want to be liable to you calling 911 and not getting through because you don't have VoLTE on your phone. And I get that. But I'm like, how does disabling my SIM make it any better? Like, I still can't call 911 with a disabled. I don't know. AT&T is weird. I don't like them. I'm mostly on T-Mobile. And then, of course, the 600 megahertz band is a big deal. And that's why, going back to my conversation earlier, folks, buy the OnePlus 12. It's US compatible, all the networks, or the Open, or if you want to be boring, sorry, pardon me, it's true, but buy the Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra. Can't go wrong. It's a solid phone. It's just very boring because it's just, one of the two mainstays of America, right? And I'm not really into that. That's just me. That's why, Pixel, that chipset. I don't know, man. What's your take on all this? Have we talked about this, you and me, before?
I feel like we maybe have, but I mean, really, it just comes down to it's an Exynos, and they haven't been delivering.
Google would hate you saying that.
But it is, right? I
It's
mean,
true.
it's
No,
very
it's
much
true.
an Exynos chipset.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying, like, yeah, I look, add an MPU that's a separate chip with all the googly stuff and add a Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 and call it a day. Yes, it'll draw a little more power. Yes, it won't be optimal, but I'd rather you do that than a custom chip. Like, you want a custom chip, add a secondary chip.
I think the main problem is the modem, to be honest with you.
It's true, but look, now that I'm on the 8 Pro for a while, I have no complaints day to day. The phone works, it runs well. The radio performance is worse than Snapdragon, but not by much. It's definitely better than it was. But I still don't feel like I've got the responsiveness of my Samsung or of my OnePlus 12 or my Open even with a 8 Gen 2. Like, what is it? Now, I know BBK Group's obsessed with performance and they do a very good job. The Oppo is super fast too. But I'm just saying, like, if Samsung can do it with all the heavy, heavy customizations on the OS, come on, you know? It's got to be the chipset. Because Google's got to be optimizing their OS to the chipset.
Well, I think it might actually be the like firmware level software for that chipset.
You know, the other thing that kind of rubs me the wrong way is after you've had a Pixel for 6 months, a year, 2 years, performance just goes down the drain. You know, you have to factory reset them basically, but you don't see that with BBK Group phones. They remain perky and fast and happy. Like, they are actually taking into account the aging of the memory use, both RAM and storage, and somehow working with that, kind of like Apple does with their SSD optimizations on their MacBooks and stuff. Like, I don't understand why this is such a strange secret thing. And it doesn't matter whether you're using a BBK Group phone or Xiaomi phone with MediaTek or Snapdragon. They do it both, right? So, yeah, that's something that Google, Apple sure probably does something like, so I don't know if their phones degrade much because I'm not an Apple iPhone user, but not long enough anyway. All right, let's go through those news items because we got a bunch here. I'm honestly excited about some of the Xiaomi stuff. We were just talking about them. Like, I'm kind of regretting in a way that I'm not able to go to Antarctica for this next month, like after MWC, because, you know, I might be able to get my hands on that 14 Ultra from Xiaomi that's going to be competing head on with the Find X7 Ultra. So, you know, that's one of the phones that we're potentially expecting. It's coming out in China very soon. I believe that the date for the launch in China has been set to tomorrow, 22nd. When is that?
Yeah.
No, 2 days from now.
I've been seeing them teasing it on Twitter quite a bit.
So speaking of which, speaking of leaks, they've been teasing photos, samples, which is interesting. And we have some specs on the cameras as well that have leaked. And honestly, this looks a lot like the Oppo in terms of specs, like camera-wise. I'm like, same main sensor, 1-inch Lithia 900, but the variable aperture now, you know, the Oppo doesn't have that. And then I don't know how many cameras. The big thing with the big kind of marketing speak around the Oppo is that it's the first quad 50 megapixel, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so this says it has 2 telephotos. One is a 3.2 optical and the other one is a 5x optical. Doesn't say if they're both periscope. I think one is periscope, probably the 5x. And then, of course, there's a 50 megapixel ultra wide. Look, they're going to be very similar. And of course, 8 Gen 3. Yeah, I can't wait to get my hands on this one and put it side by side with the Oppo, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it looks like a really nice quad camera.
So there's that. That's one thing we're expecting. We're expecting the Nothing Phone 2A. A lot of stuff has been talked about around that. I mean, nothing is, Carl Pei likes to play that. He was at OnePlus before, so he plays that OnePlus playbook of teasing to death, almost, and that's happening right now. Turns out that they've announced that it's coming on March 5th, and that it's running a special MediaTek Dimensity 7200, 7200 Pro, which is supposedly bespoke to them, using the 4 nanometer second gen TSMC process, which is interesting because I don't think the original 7200 was, I think it was first gen 4 nano or 5 nano. So this definitely looks like a bespoke chip. What's your take on that? How can a company as small as nothing, who's so far basically been Qualcomm only and has only got 2 phones out there, how can they get MediaTek to make them not a new chip, but it's a chip, but fabbed slightly differently? Like, that seems kind of like pretty amazing for a small batch company.
I think if you look at like what MediaTek does, they are always willing to do some things custom or semi-custom for customers if they have a customer who is willing to commit to it. And I think this is one of those cases where MediaTek saw an opportunity to take, a customer and deliver exactly what the customer wanted, right? So
yeah,
I think that this probably, this might just have enough volume for them where they think it's justified to do a custom run of the 7200.
I also feel that Carl, he's a good salesperson. So I'm sure he was able to kind of talk them into it a little bit. But I also feel like, there's going to potentially, this is going to be a mid-range phone, right? So there's going to be potentially a lot of demand in markets like India, for example, because the Nothing phone has been very successful there. So it's not like the numbers are going to be tiny. By the way, that phone is not coming to the US, sadly, but I mean, they've said so much. I'm not surprised. It's a very tough area to be in. Right now you basically, and this is probably going to drop below the $500 price point by a little bit from the rumors. So we're looking at, it wouldn't be quite as high end as a Pixel 8 or Pixel 7a or a OnePlus 12R, or Galaxy A series, the high end A's. It would be a little lower than that in terms of price and specs. But I want to see what they come out with, because I feel like it's not going to be disappointing. I think that if they focus on what they said they were going to focus on, which is basically overall experience, performance-wise, and camera experience, I think that that's pretty much all you need to nail. I mean, I'm not always going to take a flagship first, but we've played with some phones that weren't flagship that delivered on these points, like the OnePlus 12R, right? There's a good example. So, yeah.
Yeah. I would say I was a little surprised it's a 7200. I thought it might be an 8000 series.
Yeah, me too.
But maybe this is them kind of bridging that gap between the 7000 and the 8000 series with this Pro series, which is like maybe a more power efficient, slightly higher clock version of the 7200.
For sure. The other thing that I find interesting here is that we talked about OnePlus earlier, and there's actually a OnePlus watch being announced supposedly at MWC. You played with the first one, maybe?
No, never got a chance.
I did. For me, I'm excited because I'm one of the few people who actually reviewed the original OnePlus watch positively. And the reason I did, there were flaws, it needed software fixes, and I don't generally review products on future promises, but I knew that they were very serious about a software update, and it did come within days of my review. And it fixed a lot of problems. But I think the reason it got so poorly reviewed was because it was a dumb watch, like one of those Chinese smartwatches, 2-week battery life, big battery, OLED display, does basic health and fitness tracking, has all the basic apps like a stopwatch and all that. It doesn't have actual smart apps like Siri or assistant or like even like maps or anything like that. But if you're like me and you like long battery life, perfect. So I was excited about it. But this watch, we don't know anything about it. But what if this watch is running Android? Wear or something? Wear OS. It might be a killer option.
I think it probably will. And I have a feeling that it's going to be a compatible chipset as well, something that's already in use. So it won't really have very many bugs with the operating system. So I'm very hopeful. And yeah, like it looks like this might be kind of like a very competitive offering to what Samsung has on market today and what Google's offering with the Pixel Watch.
Basically, yeah. I'm currently wearing a Galaxy Watch 6 Classic, and I really like it. And I went from an original Pixel Watch to that. I have a second-gen Pixel Watch, but I haven't tried it. And the reason I haven't tried the second gen is not that I didn't like the Pixel Watch, is that it's too small on my wrist. I mean,
I'm the same way. I know.
I'm like, I just can't. And that's why the OnePlus Watch was a bigger watch, and I expect the OnePlus Watch 2 to be a bigger watch. And for me, that's going to be a better fit. And I probably will switch to it if it's Android Wear, or even if it isn't for a while, because I want to kind of experience what they do. So I'm actually excited about this. I was not expecting them to launch a watch at this show, but all right, let's see what else we got here. Oh yeah. So Vivo, we talked about them a little bit. Vivo already launched the V30, like the non-Pro version, like a week or two ago. And now there's rumors of a V30 Pro coming out February 28th. The reason I'm bringing this up, Anshel, is you know how fast phones are developed. Like, I don't know if you've been following the Chinese phone makers, but the Reno series from Oppo and the Vivo V series are like the poster children for let's come out with a new phone every 3 months, right? Like there's literally 2 or 3 Reno revisions a year, typically. I think we're at Reno 10 right now, and the 11's already in the works, and the 9 and the 10 both came out in 2023, and it's just insane. And the last Vivo V series I have received is the V27, and they skipped 28, but there's a 29 and a 30 now, and they're actually sending me the 30 Pro soon. But I'm like, how is it that you can make a phone every 3 months? Like, where's the economics of it? Like, you're an analyst. I want to know, like, how does that work, Anshel? Does that even make any sense?
No. The only way that it makes sense to me is if they're amortizing the design across multiple OEMs where they reuse like PCBs or they're reusing camera modules and different brands.
Well, BBK Group is very, like Xiaomi Group, very well known for part spinning. I wouldn't be surprised. But at the same time, I'm like, why? Why not do at least 2 a year? 2 a year, like not 2 a year, I mean, 1 every 6 months I could get. But 1 every 4 months is just roughly what the Reno and the Vivo V series are like. It's like 3 a year.
I think it might also be just the way that the market works. You know, if they're maybe they don't market these more frequent phones, and these more frequent phones people just buy based on the number and the specs, and they don't even bother marketing them. So that's where they save the money, and they only market like the once a year flagship as the Halo.
You know, the other thing I want to point out is that I feel like the V series, at least the ones I've tried, have never been very spectacular. Like, they're good, but they're just not great. They're just fine. You know, like I've never been like, oh my God, this is like the Reno series has always brought something to the table that I thought was pretty interesting, you know? And because they're kind of like higher end mid-rangers and they focus on design, build quality cameras. But the Vivo V series, like, I hate to say this because they're sending me a V30 Pro, but like the 27 Pro that I had was, whoa, like I just couldn't recommend it to anybody. Like when something like the OnePlus 12R exists from the same essentially company, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? So it's kind of interesting that they I don't exactly know what their market is for that product. Like I don't think it's India because they're not that huge in India. Like maybe it's domestic. I don't know. Could be it's China. But it's a mystery. But I brought it up because we got to keep track. And the Vivo V30 series is real, not just the regular, but the Pro. Also, we talked about the Galaxy S24 series camera update. We've been talking about it for a few weeks now, and it's official now. It's coming. I don't have the exact dates here, but I believe it'll depend. If you're on a carrier phone, you're going to have to wait. But if you have an unlocked phone, you probably won't. I have the unlocked one. So, yeah, I think South Korea is starting to get it first, obviously. I'm actually looking forward to that because now that I've used it in Antarctica a little more, I think there can be improvements, but I'm not as negative about it as I was initially. So, I think this update is not going to fix all your problems, but it's definitely going to be welcome, right?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really been that disappointed by the camera, but I would also say I wouldn't really say I've been wowed by it either.
Yeah. We'll see how it goes. I'll keep you posted, folks. Samsung also was able to get their folding screen from the Fold 5, right? The current folding phone, certified mil-spec standard 810, which is like basically the most common / popular military standard there is right now, which is kind of impressive to me because I really would not expect that to last through a mil-spec test. You?
I was surprised when I saw that too. Because the funny thing is that, some of the rumors around Apple's foldable were that they've put it on pause because they couldn't find a screen that was durable enough. And I'm like, I don't know if that matches this test results. Because I'm sure Samsung would sell them that screen if they wanted to use it.
I mean, the big info in that piece of news was that it resisted, being frozen and being heated repeatedly. And that I can see, but that's not the problem. The problem is freeze it and heat it and bend it at the same time, and also put it in a phone where people are poking it with their pointy fingers and you're using a pencil or S Pen on it. That's the real test to me. Like I feel like, I'm not a big Galaxy Fold user, but like my OnePlus Open is holding up really good, but I also baby it. Like I don't treat it like crap. Like I don't poke it with my fingernails too hard. Like I try to be careful because I know it's not, it's glass behind plastic, but it's not like this Oppo Find X7 Ultra, which has, standard real glass, right? So I don't know. I'm a little puzzled. That's why I put it in the news because I'm like, Our last bit of news, which I think is interesting, because it's the second time now that they've announced that they quit making phones. Meizu, which had kind of disappeared off the face of the earth even before they got acquired by the Chinese car maker Geely, aka Geely. I don't know how you say it. I cover EVs and I still don't know how you say that. Somebody want to tell me? Geely? Okay, fine. So they purchased Meizu a while back, and that wasn't too surprising. We've seen these kind of things happen. Xiaomi's making a car now. Huawei's made cars before, etc. But what's interesting here is that when they got acquired, they said, "Yeah, we're not going to make phones anymore. We're focusing on automotive platforms," and that made a perfect sense as an acquisition to me. But then they made a phone again, the Polestar phone, which is a China-only phone for the Polestar cars and the Polestar ecosystem. And if you look at it, it screams Meizu. It's gorgeous. It's high-end. It's super nice. And it's finally officially available in China now after teasers for years. It got certified by Google. But then Meizu at the same time announces that they're quitting phones. So I'm just a little puzzled by this one. It's like, okay, so you still made a phone for Polestar, which is a Geely car brand. And yet you announced originally you're making no phones, and now you're announcing again you're making no phones. And also that you're focusing on AI, but that makes sense because cars.
This reminds me of like a Tom Brady retirement.
Yeah. It's pretty much. Look, the thing is, Meizu was not doing so well. Like, Xiaomi and Meizu started around the same time and they were hot things. I mean, Xiaomi became popular because they made phones that ran Cyanogen, right? Like, wasn't that what it was? I think
And the
it was.
ecosystem.
And the ecosystem rapidly after that. But Meizu never really kept up. And they made some good phones all these years. But I reviewed a few of them and this was like 5 years ago, granted, but they weren't super great. And I didn't review the flagships, but I did see the specs on the Polestar phone, and it's state of the art. I mean, it's like, multi-lens camera system. It's got everything on paper. It's got everything you want. So of course, I'm sure it integrates really well with the car ecosystem. And that's awesome. But at the same time, I'm like, okay, you made a phone. Now you're not making a phone. Anyway, it's weird. I will try to get a Polestar phone from my car contacts. No, I've been haunting them since they announced it. They announced it at Polestar Day back in October in Santa Monica. And I was like, guys, do you have a phone here that I can take a photo of? Does this thing exist? They're like, no, we don't have one, but we'll be in touch. And so I'm like, it's funny because the car people don't know why I'm so excited about the phone, right? Especially since it's China only, right? But I want to try it out. The other one I want to try out? I want to try out the Neo phone. Neo got a phone made for them, and I still don't know who made it for them. But it's also top of the line specs. You look at the thing and you're like, oh my God, I want that phone so bad. And who knows who made that? So, yeah, that's my goal, guys. I'm going to try to get these phones.
I mean, I didn't get a chance to listen to your EV episode yet, but the Chinese car OEMs are just, they're like it. Ruthless.
Yeah.
They're ruthless.
We talked about it. You should listen to it. I think as an analyst, it'll give you some interesting perspective because I'm a little contrary in my opinions on EVs in the sense that, I have some radical views. Like, I don't think CarPlay and Android Auto are good. I think they're crutches. And I piss a lot of people off by saying that. And that's why I think that, this is actually what's really interesting. And I've written an article about this on Tech Radar where this phone integration in China is really about ecosystem, right? Like the phone and the car being in the same ecosystem, like Xiaomi's doing, like Polestar and Meizu are doing. Like, I think this is the way to go, but it's not compatible with our market, which is a duopoly of Android and iOS. And how do you resolve that? Well, on the Android side, that's easy. Instead of projecting the screen, you create Android Automotive. Of course, Google's not taking that very seriously, but some companies are adapting it and making it their own. And like Polestar is actually, and doing a good job. But on the newer Polestars, not the ones that are currently out. I've played with some of the early upcoming stuff and it's really great. But with iOS, you'll never be able to do that because, it's not like Apple's going to let you spin a virtual machine iPad on the screen of your car that you can log into with your credentials and have your entire ecosystem pop up, right? They won't let you do that.
Well, they want to sell you a car. The problem is they haven't been able to make it.
Well, I think we're far from that because I think Apple wants autonomy and they're not going to get that because autonomy right now, as we know, is a lot harder than we thought. So anyway, I don't want to make this into another car podcast. I've bored everyone to death last week with an entire show about it. Let's wrap it up. Anshel, do you want to tell folks where they can find you on the internet, where all your great analysis lives and your social media handles and all that good stuff?
So I mostly write on Forbes and on moorinsightsandstrategies.com's website. And I also post on all the socials under Anshel Sag. And I'm pretty easy to reach on social media. And I have my website in case you want to send me an angry response to something I've written, which happens quite often. And that's just anshelsag.com. But yeah, I appreciate you having me on and looking forward to coming back again soon.
Absolutely. Always Anshel. And folks, definitely follow Anshel on the social and read up his stuff on Forbes and his freebies on Moor Insights. There's a bunch. So, just like you, I have apparently some very strong opinions that are pissing people off, but more on the car side than the phone side, interestingly. You know where to find me, folks. I'm at Tankgrl. That's TNKGRL, like the comic book character. Drop all the vowels and you get my handle for all the social media pretty much. I'm active on Twitter. I'm active on Threads, particularly on Threads, and Facebook and Instagram and Blue Sky if you're there. And of course, the podcast lives at mobiletechpodcast.com. We're on all the platforms, so subscribe. And there's a YouTube channel if you want some extra content, youtube.com/mobiletechpodcasts. And you know how YouTube works, right? Like, subscribe, tell your friends, click the bell, comment. You can comment about the podcast there. But most importantly, if you want to really help me out, there is a video version of this podcast where you can watch us brandish phones and things. And that comes out a day or two, usually ahead of the audio version. And it's exclusive to my Patreons, patreon.com/Tankgrl. That's patreon.com/TNKGRL. So if you want to help me out, that's one way. The other way would be, I don't know, like there's a PayPal link in the show notes in the description of every show. You can click through there and make a donation, buy me a coffee or something. That would be lovely. But yeah, help me out if you can. Subscribe to the podcast. You use your app to rate the show and all that stuff. And I want to also thank our sponsor, Mint Mobile. So as you know, I'm constantly reviewing multiple phones, and while that's fun, it also means I'm constantly spending a lot of money for wireless service on multiple SIMs. That's where Mint Mobile comes in, and that's who I'm partnering with for today's podcast. If you also want to save money on your wireless service, switch to Mint Mobile. As tech-savvy early adopters, you've probably heard of Mint Mobile before, but let me quickly tell you how awesome their service is. Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for as low as $15 a month, and you don't have to sacrifice any coverage, speed, or data. They're built on the nation's largest 5G network. They keep costs low because they sell direct to you online. They cut out the retail stores and salespeople. Why should you pay more than you have to for access to the same network? In my experience testing phones, Mint Mobile delivers the same data speeds and call quality as the big three for a fraction of the cost. Switching to Mint is super easy. Thanks to their eSIMs, you can sign up and activate immediately right on your phone from the comfort of your home. No more standing around and waiting in line at a big wireless store. You can keep your current device and phone number and easily switch services. And if your phone isn't eSIM compatible, Mint will ship you a new SIM free of charge. All Mint Mobile plans include unlimited nationwide talk and text, lightning fast 5G, and free mobile hotspot. Mint will show you how much data you use each month and recommend plans that save you money. Mint also offers a modern family plan that lets you set up a super affordable family plan with as little as 2 lines. Use my link mintmobile.com/mobiletech to get premium wireless starting for $15 a month. That's mintmobile.com/mobiletech. Stop paying more than you need on your wireless bill and start saving big with Mint Mobile. And I want to thank you again, Anshel, for being my guest. Super awesome to have you.
Thanks.
We'll definitely have you on again. And folks, we'll definitely have a show next week at NWC, I'm hoping. So stay tuned for that. Until then, cheers, everybody.